Hello to everyone. My name is Ryan Pinkerton. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. And today I am going to give the presentation that was discussed at our last two public forums. For those of you who were unable to attend, at the end of this presentation, you'll see that there will be a link that you can use to give your input on your ideas and thoughts about our potential budget reductions in San Luis Coastal. The presentation itself, I'll share now. And this was a fiscal update and programmatic impacts that we gave both to the staff as well as to our community. And so for both groups, you can hear what I'll have to say, and it basically applies to both. So to start off, we discussed a little bit about just the fiscal condition of San Luis Coastal's budget and why we're here in discussing these items. And so you'll see, based on San Luis Coastal's district's current and projected ongoing structural deficit, and our deficit spending is largely due to the following areas. So the first was really post-pandemic academic and SEL staff and programs that were brought on post-COVID. So the district was given a large sum of money, millions of dollars, in what was called ESSER funds, as well as other state and federal funding that provided extra support for students that had a difficult time during COVID. So bringing them back both safely, as well as providing academic interventions, as well as a lot of counseling and emotional supports and programs at the same time. So we hired a lot of staff using those one-time dollars, knowing that at some point those one-time dollars would run out and we would have to, deal with having the extra resources to keep those staff ongoing. The second thing that has affected us is special education staff and program growth. So though the population of San Luis Coastal has dropped, the actual number of students qualifying for special education and IEPs and services and programs has grown over the past 5 years. And so while this is not really a budget reduction when we talk about special education, because they have a thing called maintenance of effort, where you have to spend the same amount of money on the program from one year to the next. What we are talking about is trying to find ways to contain our costs in this area, because the more special ed grows, it basically means that we won't have resources for our intervention programs and to keep those going. So it's that the kids end up, moving into special education instead of having intervention programs to try to help them get back on track, both academically and emotionally. Another thing that has happened with the district over the past 5 years is we have ongoing salary increases that we have given. San Luis Coastal actually over the past 3 years has not kept up with the other school districts in the county because they received larger state funded increases, but we have tried to maintain the same types of increases as them to ensure that our employees are paid well. And again, it's very difficult, as everyone listening to this knows, to live on the Central Coast and to afford to stay here. And so it's definitely been a priority of the board for us to try to give increases to our staff when and all possible. Along with that, the district's contribution to the teacher retirement system, STRS, as well as the classified retirement system, PERS, has gone up substantially over the past 10 years. And so for teachers, it's gone upwards to 8% to 19% that the district has to contribute, as well as for PERS, it's gone from 8% up to, I believe, 27% at this point, and still rising. So those costs that are incurred by the district, again, we don't have a choice, we have to do it. And it's a good thing for our employees to have a stable retirement system in place, right, when we all retire. But those are dramatic increases in costs, again, for every single employee we have in the school district. So the next one is something that Dr. Prater alluded to during the presentation a lot, and that is the unfunded implementation of transitional kindergarten. To best explain that for the people listening, we receive funds for all students to have free lunches now. So the state has set aside money and gave every student in the state of California, the funds in every district, the funds for all students to receive free meals. They've done another program called ELOPE, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, so that students are able to receive both before and after school care, as well as a 30 days extended learning period using those funds. And all school districts in California receive those funds. The governor started a program that has been slowly transitioning in called Transitional Kindergarten, which is meant to have 4-year-olds, kind of a mandated preschool program for schools to be able to offer. So that was set up. Our district actually, prior to TK even beginning, our board realized that we had students that weren't attending preschool. It was a huge need in our community. So they had actually set up preschools for our most at-risk students prior to, again, to TK even starting. So this has been, an initiative, a goal of our boards for a long time. That said, TK program started, and when the governor set this up and set up this new plan to begin it, he actually left basic aid school districts out of the funding, unlike free lunches, unlike the ELOPE extended day plan. But with TK, we were not included. So San Luis Coastal is a basic aid school district. And when I say that, basically what that means is that we receive in property taxes more than what we would receive if we were funded by the state. Now, there are a variety of basic aid school districts in terms of that realm. There are basic aid school districts that receive $40,000 per student through their property taxes. And then there are districts like San Luis Coastal that receives $14,000. So again, very different in terms of when we look at basic aid districts, and that's what we hear in terms of the TK funding, that the state feels like, hey, basic aid school districts are funded enough, and they don't want to, they don't want to give basic aid school districts that same funding level that state funded districts are receiving. So this has been a hot topic that we've spoke a lot about at both our board meetings as well as recently at both public forums, so that people can understand why we would even consider not doing transitional kindergarten. So that's a big one. The good news, I would say, after having these 2 public forums, is that in speaking with our transitional kindergarten staff, they are open to assisting us, helping us, because it's not necessarily even what we currently spend on TK. It's with expanding it another 3 months into the coming school year. We were looking at not only having our current structural deficit, but increasing that by another $1.5 million with that expansion of TK. So we're currently working with our TK teachers to see how we can come up with a way to really not reduce our budget, but not expand the current deficit. And they've been great, fantastic. And ultimately, the board will be making a decision on all reductions as we move forward. The next one is reduction of unitary tax from Diablo Canyon, a nuclear power plant, and the depreciation of the plant. And this is something that few years ago we found out Diablo Canyon was going to close. So we met with them, and honestly, they were great at the time. We had set up a plan to receive some funding so that the district would have time to work with its budget, move forward, right, with the depreciation. And so with that, we received a $10 million kind of fund to start an education foundation, as well as the district has been receiving money over the past 6 years. And next year will be the last year that will receive those SB 1090 funds. And so again, that's one of the reasons why we're now at that point where those funds are gone. And so we have to make budget reductions because of that. Now people will ask, well, isn't Diablo Canyon staying open? Right now, though they do have kind of some expanding the plant for a year or two, we are still awaiting the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to see if they're going to grant a new 20-year license for the plant. And at that point, when we know that the plant is going to be open for longer, then the Public Utilities Commission, then the district, the county of San Luis Obispo, the cities will become interveners to try to get that unitary tax back and apply that taxation right, so that all of our communities, as well as the school district, will receive unitary tax again. For our school district, that could mean up to $8 million annually in terms of increased funding. But again, until that is known and for sure, that is something that we'll continue to work with PG&E on to see where we can regain those funds. But it's not something we can count on until we know for sure that it's in place. So again, that reduction of unitary taxes is yet another reason for the fiscal condition. And then lastly, too, I'd be remiss to say that, with school sites, our 10 elementary schools, our 2 middle schools, our 2 high schools, our district office, our continuation school, goods and services have increased. So the cost of sewer, gas, electric bills, all those things have increased over time. And so for us, as a basic aid school district too, we try to maintain a 10% reserve for economic uncertainties for times like this as we move forward. And so though the state has a 3% reserve, we try to maintain a 10. And just for people to understand, a 10% reserve represents 1 month of salaries for our employees. So though it seems like a large percentage, in actuality, it's really not a lot of money when you boil it down, right? So again, that is something that we have in place. And can we go lower than that? Yes, we can, right? But we have to be cautious. At our current rate of deficit spending, we will have no reserves in 2 years without reductions. Not 10%, not 3%, 0%. So that is something this is why we have to do this. In terms of how we spend our dollars in San Luis Coastal, our budget revenues this year are $136 million. Our expenditures, as you can see, and we knew that we were going to be deficit spending because our reserves had grown over the time period, receiving the one-time monies. We had those programs in place. We kept them in place as long as possible. The reason why we were able to keep them 5 years instead of 3 is because property taxes have increased greatly over that same period of receiving the one-time money. But last year we had a $7 million deficit. This year we believe we have a $6 million deficit. And next year, currently, if we do nothing, we will have a $6 million deficit. So over 2 years, it's about $8.7 million we have to decrease. And so, again, that's why we're speaking about this. As you can see from these top 3 categories, we are a people organization. Almost 88% of our budget is people. So when we talk about reductions, yes, we can look at some non-personnel items, some ways to cut, some contracts, things like that. But the reality is most of these reductions will come from staff reductions, which is really unfortunate. So how have we increased post-COVID? 1920 to 24-25. Again, you'll see we have kept class sizes really low. We've added 27 staff to our certificated classrooms. We have added a ton of supports outside the classroom from counselors, more school psychologists, speech and language pathologists. We've added some teachers on special assignment to help set up intervention programs for students. Again, we've added 53 certificated staff through that process. We have added 1.5 certificated administrators currently. We actually had 3 other certificated administrators, principals on special assignment, that we reduced after the 22-23 school year. And that's why they're not included on this chart, because we've already reduced them. But we did add one assistant principal at Laguna, as well as a half of principal to run our summer experience program. And again, that half is paid through grant funds, so it doesn't affect our general fund budget. On the classified side, you have to look at two different things. We have added 69 staff, but added 93 FTE. And what that means is that's a full-time equivalent. So many of our classified staff are part-time. But over the past 5 years, we have really tried to make our classified staff full-time employees because our turnover rate was really bad. Bus drivers, again, paraeducators. So trying to add hours to make them full-time, doing other intervention work, other custodial work for our bus drivers, those types of things, right? So that we could keep staff. So you'll see that FTE, the full-time equivalent, has grown to 93 people. And then lastly, we have 2 confidential staff, classified staff here at the district office that have been added. And both of those are being reduced this year through attrition, through retirements. But overall, that represents about 173 more full-time equivalent positions that we've added over the past 5 years. At the same time, the district has only added 110 students. And that's really only because of the increase with TK enrollment. Our actual K-12 enrollment has dropped, and our TK enrollment has grown and will continue to grow. Next year, we're looking at potentially another 80 students in TK as we have the whole full year of students coming to us with TK enrollment. This is not all of the positions that represent the 173. Again, you can count it up. It's not 173 people, but these are just some examples of some of the staff that were added during this time period, right? And all indications are that our students post-COVID were doing, had dropped dramatically in their academics. Our testing went down. A lot of emotional support issues, behaviors with students when they came back from COVID were happening. So over the past 5 years, these things that we added have made a huge difference for kids. Our academic results, the new state dashboard, are back at the level we were pre-COVID. Yes, we have a ton of supports for students, behaviorally, emotionally support. I would love to say that we don't have those issues anymore, but the fact is we still have a lot of students that have emotional needs and need counseling and need support in that realm. That has not gone away, even with all of the supports. But I will say that we are, again, working with students, trying to meet their needs and have more staff available now than we've ever had. So what are we going to do? We have budget issues. We've hired all these people. How are we going to get our budget back in line? Again, I talked about, we will look at some non-personnel reductions, but unfortunately, we also are going to have to reduce and not eliminate programs, but reduce the amount of staff we have in those programs. So again, in the next 2 years, that represents about an $8.7 million structural deficit. When we look at the reductions for certificated and classified staff, we do have staff that are on temporary contracts. We will have resignations, retirements. So as much of this that we can do through attrition, through people leaving the organization and keeping people in jobs, we will do. But we will lose some of our newest, brightest stars that have been hired over the past year. We will reassign some of those non-classroom teachers back to the classroom to teach. They were all classroom teachers prior to becoming TOSAs or interventionists, so that can happen. You'll see that we have modified this slide to not say closure of transitional kindergarten, but we are looking at trying to modify our TK program so that we can, again, keep our current budget and hopefully not have to add that 1.5 million extra to our deficit number. So again, that would increase our deficit to 10.3 million instead of 8.7 million if we don't do anything with TK, right? In terms of our, again, it's not just classroom, it's going to be intervention programs. We will have to look at some of our social emotional support programs that we provide for students. We are going to have to look at some of our academic interventions as well. when we talk about restructuring special education staff, as I mentioned earlier, again, we cannot cut special education, but we can look at how are we serving students? What are we doing? How is that working, right? And trying to find ways to, again, not reduce, but contain spending in that area. We're already have started a hiring freeze in our organization, so certain positions, if they're on the list, if we know that we need to make reductions, like I said, the 2 positions here at the district office, we are not refilling those. And then lastly, we don't just tell people that, hey, thanks a lot, you're gone. No, there is a formal process that school districts have to go through for both certificated and classified staff in order to make any and all reductions. And so we will be working with our unions on that reduction process, and again, trying to make it as easy as possible, and really notifying and communicating with our employees as much as we can. And then lastly, we still have an LCAP, we still have a plan that we have to put together. So with all of those things, we're going to have to look at what we have in our LCAP and prioritize our programs that have the greatest impact so that they're included. And that process will be ongoing from now until June. So lastly, how are we communicating this out to you, to our stakeholders? And so again, we knew there was a $7 million deficit in September when we got our unaudited actuals with the budget. We knew that in December, when I gave my first interim presentation after we received our property taxes, that was a board item, and gave, let that known. And at that point, Dr. Prater had sent out a letter to all staff on December 17th. And our parent community as well, kind of, hey, just warning everybody that when we come back for the beginning of the year, we're going to start to have to make some difficult decisions through this process. On January 14th at the board meeting, we gave a fiscal update, and again, the same programmatic impact, more slides. If you want to see the entire presentation, you can go to that board agenda item and pull it up and see the rest of the slides that were given. We cut that down dramatically at our public forums because we wanted to hear from people. Instead of having us talk, we wanted to hear from our stakeholders and hear their feedback and what they had to say. And so that's why this slide presentation was much shorter than the one given at the board agenda on January 14th. So we are right now meeting with our labor partners, meeting with our cabinet team, trying to put together a plan that we can present to the board that really is our best thinking, and trying to, again, there will be impacts, there will be reductions, we understand that, but what can we do to try to keep them as far away from the classroom, to try to maintain a lot of those supports for students, both academically and emotionally, as possible. So that's what we're going to put together. Again, we held the 2 public forums on the 15th and 22nd of January. And then we will be bringing forward kind of a reduction list, our best thinking, on February 4th to the Board of Education, so they could consider those items and can give us feedback. And then our final decision, because this is the date where we have to have the board approve a resolution for any staff reductions, so that we can then notify staff formally, legally, by March 15th. And so that will be the February 18th meeting. And then again, though we make those reductions, really the board doesn't approve the final LCAP and budget until the end of May, beginning of June. So this isn't the only input. It's not the only time where we'll be having these conversations. But it is because of the notification of employees, that's why it seems rushed. That's why it seems like we're having to do this quickly, but realize that the budget process will continue through February, or through May to June. Depending on what happens with the state, the governor will put out what's called a May revise in May, and we will see if there's any dollars that the state has coming forward to districts that we as a basic aid school district could also receive. Now, we have a lot of A lot of people have come forward. A lot of people want to help and support our push to get TK paid for by the state, to help us with our PG&E, Diablo Canyon funding. And so I know Dr. Prater will be reaching out to our community, to our stakeholders, to our staff, and our community newsletters coming up, so that he can get your names, information. He has already been in contact with our state legislatures. Miss Addis, Don Addis, our state assembly person, has reached out to Dr. Prater, is actually willing to help us and potentially carry a bill forward to receive that TK funding, as well as we are meeting with PG&E to discuss the future of Diablo Canyon and the NRC approval and whether we will receive unitary tax. So we will continue to keep those things in mind while making these decisions, while also understanding that we have to balance our budget. So the last slide, and I'll leave this up here for a minute, is basically just for you to, it's called a Parsec Reel. So basically it's your way to give us some feedback. So after hearing my presentation, what additional questions and feedback do you have? Do you have alternate suggestions to the budget reductions that we're considering? And what else do you want us to know about your needs and concerns as we make these decisions, as we prepare this information for the Board of Education to make an informed decision? So please take a moment. Again, we will also send this link along with these links that you have in front of you in our parent and staff newsletters, so that you can complete this if you're unable to do it right now. And we'll also put those links on our website for you to share. I hope this has been informative, and we look forward to continuing this communication and really sharing, any and all aspects of this, as well as our program decisions in the coming months. Thank you.